In the heart of Montana's vast plains, where golden wheat fields stretch endlessly towards snow-capped mountains, an extraordinary story unfolded that would challenge everything a small town thought they knew about honor, prejudice, and unexpected alliances. When 62-year-old cattle rancher Samuel "Sam" Hayes stopped his weathered pickup truck on Highway 89 to help a stranded Native American man, he never imagined that single act of decency would ignite a firestorm of mockery from his own community. The townspeople of Cedar Ridge had known Sam for decades, a hard-working man who'd built his ranch from nothing after returning from Vietnam. And how one man, a simple act of kindness, unveiled a truth so profound it would forever change a community's soul. Sometimes the most ordinary people carry the most extraordinary stories, waiting for the right moment to emerge from the shadows of judgment into the light of understanding. But their respect quickly turned to ridicule when word spread about his roadside assistance. What happened next defied all logic and left an entire town speechless. As dawn broke over the Montana landscape the following morning, residents discovered something that would force them to confront their deepest assumptions about their neighbor and themselves. The sight that greeted them challenged not only their understanding of Sam Hayes, but revealed secrets that had been hidden in plain sight for years. This is a story about courage in the face of prejudice, the power of unexpected friendships. Before we continue with Chapter 1, please like this story, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in humanity. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty stretch of Highway 89 as Samuel Hayes drove his dust-covered Ford F-150 back towards Cedar Ridge. The radio crackled with static, playing an old country song that reminded him of better times. Times before his wife Martha had passed 3 years ago. At 62, he still worked his 800-acre ranch alone, rising before dawn to tend to his cattle, mend fences, and fight the constant battle against Montana's unforgiving elements. His calloused palms told the story of decades spent wrestling with barbed wire, hauling feed, and coaxing life from stubborn soil. Times before the town had slowly started viewing him as just another aging rancher whose best days were behind him. A figure stood beside a broken-down sedan, hood up, steam rising into the cooling air. The man appeared to be in his 40s, with long black hair tied back and wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. Even from a distance, Sam could tell by the man's features and the beaded bracelet catching the sunlight that he was Native American. "I was heading back to the reservation after visiting my daughter in Billings." Sam squinted through the windshield, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel. He paused, leaving the sentence unfinished, but Sam understood. He'd been raised to help folks in trouble. It was simply the right thing to do, regardless of who they were or where they came from. Sam diagnosed the problem, a burst radiator hose, and used electrical tape from his toolbox to create a temporary fix. "My grandfather made this. He always said the eagle watches over those with good hearts." Joseph shared water from his bottle to refill the radiator, and Sam added some coolant he kept in his truck bed. Curious and always eager for gossip, she'd slowed down just enough to see the interaction through her side mirror. By the time she reached Murphy's Diner in town, she had a story to tell. "Please, it's important to me that you have it. Always been helpful to folks in need." In Cedar Ridge, interactions between the town's predominantly white population and the nearby Crow Reservation were minimal at best, cordial but distant at worst. But some folks might take advantage of that kindness, if you know what I mean. The small wooden eagle sat on his kitchen table, catching the light from his reading lamp. Something about the carving stirred a memory, a feeling of connection to something larger than himself, something he hadn't felt since his days in Vietnam, when survival had depended on looking out for your fellow soldiers, regardless of their background. Most folks minded their own business, but there were undercurrents of old tensions that never quite disappeared. Or that the judgment of his neighbors was about to test everything he believed about the community he'd called home for over 30 years. His father had taught him that a man's character was measured not by his words, but by his actions when nobody was watching. As he rounded the bend near Crow Creek Bridge, Sam spotted something that made him ease off the gas pedal. Had his tools out and everything, acting like they were old buddies. Old Sam Hayes, playing Good Samaritan to some Indian on Highway 89, spent near half an hour helping him fix his car. Sam Hayes. Let me take a look. Without hesitation, Sam pulled over, gravel crunching under his tires. "Engine trouble," Sam called out as he approached, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. The man looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Overheated about 10 minutes ago. I'm Joseph Crowfeather." Sam nodded, extending a calloused hand. At the rusty spur bar, the tale had evolved into Sam consorting with reservation folks. At the grocery store, whispers suggested he was too trusting for his own good. By the time the story reached the coffee shop the next morning, some were questioning Sam's judgment entirely. For the next 20 minutes, the two men worked side by side, in comfortable silence. "This should get you home," Sam said, wiping his hands on an old rag. "But get it properly fixed soon." Joseph's eyes held genuine gratitude. "I can't thank you enough. Most people, we're all just trying to get by out here," Sam replied simply. As Joseph prepared to leave, he reached into his car and pulled out a small wooden carving, an eagle with outstretched wings, no bigger than Sam's palm. Sam tried to refuse the gift, but Joseph insisted. Unknown to both men, Darla Hoffman had been driving home from her job at the bank when she spotted Sam's truck pulled over. "You'll never guess what I just saw," Darla announced to the handful of regulars nursing their coffee at the counter. Earl Morrison, who owned the hardware store, looked up from his newspaper. "That's so. Sure as I'm sitting here." The diner fell quiet for a moment. "Well, that's Sam for you," said Betty Lou, the waitress, trying to diffuse any brewing negativity. But Earl's expression had darkened. Helpful's one thing. By evening the story had spread through Cedar Ridge like wildfire, growing and changing with each telling. Sam remained blissfully unaware of the town's chatter as he completed his evening chores. As he prepared for bed, Sam had no idea that his simple act of roadside assistance would become the talk of the town. The next morning arrived grey and overcast, typical for early October in Montana. Sam Hayes was already 3 hours into his daily routine, having fed his cattle and checked the fence line along the eastern pasture. Earl Morrison sat at his usual spot at the counter, holding court with a growing audience of locals who hung on his every word. The wooden eagle carving sat on his kitchen windowsill, catching what little light filtered through the clouds as he poured his second cup of coffee. At Murphy's Diner, the breakfast crowd was unusually animated. "I'm just saying," Earl continued, gesturing with his fork, "a man gets to be Sam's age, starts making questionable decisions. Next thing you know, he'll be inviting the whole reservation over for Sunday dinner." Laughter rippled through the group, but it had an edge to it. "Earl, what exactly are you trying to say?" But Earl's jaw tightened, and several of the younger men at the table shifted uncomfortably. The moment he parked outside Peterson's feed store, he noticed the change. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Eyes followed his movements. The usual nods and greetings were replaced by awkward stares and uncomfortable silences. Because if you're suggesting there's something wrong with helping a stranded motorist, regardless of their ethnicity, then maybe you need to examine your own conscience. Maybe we should worry about our own business instead of judging a man for being neighborly. Betty Lou frowned as she refilled coffee cups, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Sam Hayes has been nothing but decent to everyone in this town for 30 years, she said firmly. At the bank, Darla Hoffman served him with icy efficiency, her usual chatter replaced by professional coldness. At the post office, conversation ceased when he entered, resuming in hushed tones after he left. "Neighborly?" Earl scoffed. "Betty, there's a difference between helping your neighbor and... well, you know what I mean." Sam sat in his truck outside Murphy's diner, debating whether to go in for his usual late lunch. Through the window, he could see the familiar faces of people he'd known for decades, their animated conversation suggesting he was likely the topic of discussion. Doc Williams, the retired physician who'd delivered half the babies in town, looked up from his newspaper and was now grazing contentedly in his neighbor, Sweetfield. Sam spent the better part of the morning repairing the fence and coaxing the 2,000-pound animal back where he belonged. Joseph Crowfeather had mentioned his grandfather, a man who believed the eagle watched over those with good hearts. The first was from his insurance agent, awkwardly suggesting they should review his policy given recent developments. The second was from a fellow rancher, cancelling plans to help with cattle drives next month, without explanation. The third was from Earl Morrison himself. Sam wondered what his own grandfather, who taught him that character was measured by how you treated people when it cost you something, would think of Cedar Ridge's reaction. "Look, I think you and I should have a conversation about, well, about being more careful about the company you keep. This is a small town, and people talk. Give me a call." The diner fell silent. Doc Williams commanded respect in Cedar Ridge, and his words carried weight. "I just got the strangest call from my buddy Rick, who lives in Cedar Ridge. He said there's some kind of talk going around town about you. Something about you helping someone on the highway." Whatever tomorrow brought, he knew he'd made the right choice on Highway 89. The question was whether Cedar Ridge would ever see it that way. Sam had no way of knowing that forces beyond his understanding were already in motion, and that the morning would bring revelations that would forever change how his town saw both him and themselves. These were his neighbors, people he'd helped during floods and blizzards, people whose children he'd taught to ride horses, people who'd brought casseroles when Martha died. Yet now, because he'd stopped to help a stranded motorist, they viewed him with suspicion. Meanwhile, Sam was dealing with his own problems. His prize bull, Thunder, had somehow gotten through a section of fence during the night. It was nearly noon when he finally drove into town for supplies. "Didn't know it was anybody's business." Rick said Earl Morrison's been stirring up trouble, suggesting he's implying things about your judgment. Inside the feed store, Tom Peterson, a man Sam had known since high school, barely looked up from his paperwork. "Need 50 pounds of cattle feed and some fence wire," Sam said, approaching the counter. "Wire's in the back," Tom replied curtly, not meeting Sam's eyes. "Feed's over there." Sam studied his old friend's face. "Tom, everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Sam. Just busy today." As Sam loaded his supplies, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the town's atmosphere. By mid-afternoon, the weight of the town's judgment had become impossible to ignore. His phone rang, his nephew David calling from Billings. "Uncle Sam?" Sam's heart sank. If word had reached Billings, the gossip had spread further than he'd imagined. "I helped a man with car trouble yesterday," Sam said simply. "Well, apparently some folks are making it their business." After hanging up, Sam sat in the parking lot for a long time, watching the people of Cedar Ridge go about their daily business. The wooden eagle carving sat on his dashboard, its carved eyes seeming to watch the world with patient wisdom. As evening approached, Sam drove home to find 3 messages on his answering machine. "Sam, this is Earl." Sam deleted all 3 messages without returning the calls. He spent the evening on his porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains, the wooden eagle in his weathered palm. The night air carried the sound of distant thunder, promising rain. Sam Hayes woke before dawn, as was his habit, but something felt different. The air seemed charged with an energy he couldn't quite place, and an unusual silence had settled over his ranch. Even his cattle were quieter than normal, standing motionless in the morning mist that clung to the pasture. As he stepped onto his porch with his first cup of coffee, Sam noticed vehicles moving along the main road earlier than usual. Through the grey dawn light, he could make out several cars and trucks heading toward town, their headlights cutting through the fog. Betty Lou from the diner, her voice tight with excitement and confusion. Something was happening in Cedar Ridge. His phone rang at 6:30 a.m. "I can't explain it over the phone. Just come. And Sam, take the back road into town." But not by construction crews or emergency vehicles. Instead, a line of men in matching uniforms stood across the road like sentinels. Even from a distance, Sam could see they wore dark clothing with distinctive patches, and they stood with military precision beside several black SUVs. Maybe you can make sense of this. There are at least a dozen men blocking the main road. Professional security by the look of them. Sam asked, still trying to process the surreal scene. "They're not letting anyone through without checking some kind of list. I tried to assert municipal authority, but they showed me federal credentials. They're polite, but absolutely unmovable. These guys are legitimate, but nobody will tell me what they're doing here. All I know is they arrived at 4 a.m. and set up their checkpoint. They've got some kind of federal mandate, and they're specifically protecting this town. Don't use Highway 89. Sam, you need to get down here, right now." "What's wrong, Betty?" As he crested the final ridge overlooking the town, he pulled over and stared in absolute bewilderment at the scene below. But even as he said it, doubts crept into his mind. Joseph Crow Feather had seemed like an ordinary man dealing with car trouble. 2 black SUVs were stationed at his main gate, and men with earpieces were patrolling his property line. What the hell is going on? Yesterday we're all worried about Sam's judgment, and today the federal government is treating him like some kind of VIP. But the way he'd spoken about his grandfather, the weight behind his words when he'd said, "most people," as if he understood prejudice from personal experience. Maybe there had been more to their encounter than Sam realized. Federal offices referred her to other departments that wouldn't take her calls, the same people who'd whispered about his questionable associations. Yesterday were now looking to him for explanations about why federal agents considered him worthy of protection. Whatever this is about, it's bigger than car trouble on Highway 89. I think you need to seriously consider what might have happened during that encounter yesterday that you haven't told us about. It was as if Cedar Ridge had suddenly become invisible to the outside world, except for the mysterious security presence that continued to grow throughout the day. In his pocket, the wooden eagle seemed to pulse with warmth, and for the first time he began to wonder if Joseph Crow Feather was far more than just a stranded motorist he'd happened to help. Why not? When questioned, they were polite, but revealed nothing about their mission or how long they planned to stay. That when the Johnson farm flooded 3 years back, you were the first one there with sandbags and the last one to leave. "Sam, there's something else. About an hour ago, one of those security men came in here asking about you specifically, wanted to know where you lived, how long you'd been in town, what kind of man you were. You'll understand when you see it." Against his better judgment, Sam drove the long way around, using the old ranch roads that wound through the hills behind Cedar Ridge. The parking lot overflowed with vehicles, and people clustered in groups on the sidewalk, pointing and whispering. Sam parked behind the building and entered through the kitchen door, where Betty Lou grabbed his arm immediately. Today, faced with federal agents asking questions, the situation had taken on an entirely different complexion. Doc Williams stood by the window with a pair of binoculars, studying the road blockade. Even Darla Hoffman looked shaken, her usual gossipy confidence replaced by genuine bewilderment. Highway 89, the main road leading into Cedar Ridge, was blocked. At Murphy's Diner, the entire town seemed to have gathered. "Thank God you're here. Nobody knows what to make of this." The diner buzzed with nervous energy. Earl Morrison sat at his usual spot, but his face had lost all its previous smugness. "Sam!" Doc Williams called out when he spotted him. "What kind of list?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," said Mayor Patricia Reynolds, who'd arrived still wearing her bathrobe under a hastily thrown-on coat. Sheriff Jake Morrison, Earl's younger brother, entered the diner looking haggard. "I just got off the phone with the county." "Protecting us from what?" Earl demanded, his voice higher than usual. "That's what nobody will say." Betty Lou approached Sam with a cup of coffee, her expression troubled. The diner fell silent. Every eye in the room turned to Sam, but the hostility from the previous day had been replaced by confusion and something that looked like fear. "What did you tell him?" Sam asked quietly. "The truth, that you're one of the best men in this town, that you've helped every family here at some point." Earl Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Yesterday, he'd been leading the charge of gossip against Sam. Doc Williams lowered his binoculars. "Sam, I have to ask, that man you helped yesterday, do you think this could be connected?" "I didn't see how helping someone fix their radiator hose could bring federal agents to Cedar Ridge," Sam replied. The wooden eagle carving was in his pocket, and he found himself touching it unconsciously. Around noon, the tension in town reached a breaking point when word spread that the security team had established a perimeter around Sam's ranch as well. "This is insane," Earl burst out. Mayor Reynolds was on her phone constantly, trying to reach anyone who could provide answers. State officials claimed ignorance. By afternoon, the number of agents had doubled. They maintained their checkpoint, allowing only residents with proper identification to enter or leave the town. Sam spent the day in the diner, fielding questions he couldn't answer, and watching his neighbors struggle to reconcile their previous judgment with the current reality. As sunset approached, Sheriff Morrison approached Sam with a grim expression. "Sam, I just got word that more agents are arriving tonight." Sam stared out the diner window at the roadblock that had transformed his quiet town into something resembling a military operation. The truth was coming, whether Cedar Ridge was ready for it or not. The answer came with the dawn of the third day, carried by a convoy of black vehicles that wound through the Montana hills like a presidential motorcade. Sam Hayes stood on his front porch, still clutching his morning coffee as he watched the procession approach his ranch. The lead vehicle bore small flags that fluttered in the crisp morning air. Flags he recognized from his time in Vietnam. Flags that meant serious business. Joseph Crow Feather wasn't just any stranded motorist. Behind him emerged a man in military dress uniform whose chest displayed enough ribbons and medals to fill a shadow box. I didn't mention that my grandfather was Chief Standing Bear, and that I inherited more than just his woodcarving skills. A third man wore the kind of expensive suit that whispered federal authority. Chief Crow Feather is not only a tribal leader, he's been serving as a special advisor to the Department of Defense on Native American affairs and strategic land management. When he called in his delayed arrival and mentioned a local rancher had assisted him, we initiated standard security protocols. But that's not why we're here, Sam. By yesterday morning, we knew exactly how your neighbors had reacted to your assistance. It's rarely used, but when a citizen displays exceptional character under pressure, particularly when facing social consequences for doing the right thing, we take notice. I don't understand what you're telling me. We knew about the gossip, the judgment, The way people you'd known for decades turned their backs on you simply because you'd helped a Native American stranger. We're here because of what happened after you helped me. It had been a social experiment, a way to observe how a community reacts when faced with the consequences of their prejudices. But we wanted you to know that your actions have been officially recognized. But this time, the conversations carried a very different tone. The old physician looked older somehow, weighed down by shame and realization. At Murphy's diner, Earl Morrison sat in stunned silence, staring at his untouched coffee as the reality of his behavior sank in. Betty Lou moved between tables, her usual cheerful demeanor subdued as she processed how quickly the town had turned on one of their own. But I let prejudice cloud my judgment just like everyone else. You were the only one who saw a man who needed help instead of a stereotype to be suspicious of. Earl Morrison made a point of greeting everyone with the same respect, regardless of their background. He'd been reminded that character isn't revealed in grand gestures or public declarations, but in quiet moments when no one important is watching, except that someone is always watching, and every act of decency ripples outward in ways we never anticipate. The diner added a small plaque by the door. "All travelers welcome." The chief had come alone this time, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, looking once again like the ordinary man who'd needed help with car trouble. Sheriff Morrison instituted community dialogue sessions about prejudice and inclusion, sessions that were surprisingly well attended. They appear when someone demonstrates the kind of character that reminds us what America is supposed to be about. That's what makes the difference. My grandfather always said that when good hearts find each other, they lift each other up. You lifted me up on Highway 89, Sam, more than you know. Sam Hayes never sought recognition for helping Joseph Crow Feather, but in a world that often seems divided by suspicion, it was about the moment when we choose to help instead of ignore, to include instead of exclude, to trust instead of fear. They wore suits and badges and carried the authority of a grateful nation that still believes in recognizing good character when it appears. But the real protection came from something simpler and more powerful, the knowledge that doing right always matters, even when the world tries to convince us it doesn't. It was about remembering that our communities are only as strong as our willingness to see each other as fellow human beings, deserving of dignity and assistance. And prejudice, his simple act of roadside assistance, became something much larger, proof that good people still exist, and that doing the right thing always matters, even when it costs you something. Chief Crow Feather has recommended you for a civilian honor, and your story will be included in a Department of Defense study on character and community resilience. And comment below with a time when you or someone you know chose to help a stranger despite what others might think. Your story could inspire someone else to choose kindness over prejudice. Together, we can remind the world that character still matters and that every act of decency creates ripples that reach farther than we ever imagine. But now he understood its significance differently. It's about choosing to see shared humanity instead of perceived differences, about maintaining your principles even when your community questions them, and about understanding that sometimes the most ordinary moments become the most defining ones of our lives. Joseph Crow Feather's grandfather had carved it for someone he'd never meet, trusting that someday it would find its way to a person who needed reminding that good hearts still existed in the world. The agents had been documenting Cedar Ridge's response, studying how quickly gossip spreads and how easily people turn on their neighbors. We noticed that when your community mocked you for helping someone who looked different from you, you never wavered. You never apologized. You never tried to distance yourself from your actions. That kind of character is rare, Mr. Hayes. 3 days ago, he was returning from a classified briefing in Billings when his vehicle broke down. He was tribal leadership, and Sam's simple act of roadside assistance had apparently set events in motion that reached far beyond Cedar Ridge. Sheriff Morrison's radio crackled to life at 7 a.m. with a message that sent him racing to Sam's ranch. "Tell Mr. Hayes that Chief Crowfeather would like to speak with him." "Sam, I've dealt with prejudice my entire life. I've learned to expect it, to navigate around it, to protect myself from it. But what you did, stopping without hesitation, working beside me like we were old friends, accepting my grandfather's carving with genuine respect, that reminded me that good people still exist." Chief. The word hit Sam like a physical blow as pieces of a puzzle he hadn't even known existed suddenly clicked into place. The lead vehicle stopped in Sam's driveway, and out stepped Joseph Crowfeather, but this time he wore a black suit with subtle Native American silver jewelry that caught the morning light. "Sam," Joseph said, approaching with that same genuine smile from Highway 89. "I told you my grandfather believed the eagle watches over those with good hearts." The uniformed man stepped forward and extended his hand. "Mr. Hayes, I'm General Robert Martinez, Joint Chiefs of Staff." Sam's mind reeled. "I just helped fix a radiator hose." "You did more than that," the federal agent interjected, introducing himself as Director William Chen from Homeland Security. Chief Crowfeather was carrying sensitive information about critical mineral deposits on reservation lands, deposits essential to national defense manufacturing. Joseph held up his hand, speaking in a voice that carried the weight of authority Sam hadn't detected during their roadside encounter. The chief gestured toward the town of Cedar Ridge, visible in the valley below. Word travels fast in small communities. General Martinez stepped closer, his expression serious. "Mr. Hayes, Chief Crowfeather recommended you for something we call the Civilian Service Recognition Program." Sam felt the wooden eagle in his pocket, its carved surface smooth from his nervous handling over the past 2 days. "We're telling you that your government noticed," Director Chen said simply. Joseph smiled, but his expression held a deeper sadness. The federal security presence, Sam learned, hadn't been about protecting him or the town from external threats. "The security checkpoint will be removed this afternoon," General Martinez explained. As the morning progressed, word of the revelation spread through Cedar Ridge with the same speed that gossip had traveled 2 days earlier. Doc Williams found Sam on his porch that evening after the federal vehicles had departed and the roadblocks had been removed. "Sam, I owe you an apology. We all do." "No need, Doc." "There is a need. I've lived in this town for 40 years, delivered babies, sat with dying patients, seen people at their best and worst." The wooden eagle sat on Sam's kitchen table that night, catching the light from his reading lamp just as it had 3 evenings ago. Over the following weeks, Cedar Ridge slowly returned to normal, but with subtle changes that spoke to hard-learned lessons. Sam continued his daily routine of ranch work, but now it carried additional meaning. The eagle carving remains on his windowsill, a daily reminder that helping a stranger isn't just about fixing radiator hoses or changing tires. Cedar Ridge learned that weekend that federal agents don't appear overnight to protect random ranchers. The morning after the agents left, Sam found Joseph Crowfeather waiting by his fence line. "I wanted to thank you properly," Joseph said, away from all the official ceremony. "No thanks needed. I did what anyone should do, but not what everyone would do." Joseph handed Sam a second carving, this one of 2 eagles flying together, their wings almost touching. As Sam watched Joseph drive away, he realized the story wasn't really about federal agents or security details or government recognition. The knights who guarded Sam's road weren't wearing armor or carrying swords. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that good people still exist in this world, please like this video. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories.